Hello, I'm Jamie Flinchbaugh, host of People Solve Problems, and today we have a guest, Krista Smith. Krista, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yep, very glad to have you. So a little introduction. Krista is an executive at the nation's largest national security engineering laboratory, Sandia National Laboratory, leading the organization's project management capability. She had prior roles in senior executive leadership in facilities, infrastructure, supply chain, business operations. So lots of breadth, lots of different leadership roles, and lots of changes in those roles as you go through them. So um, I know an important topic to you has been leadership, especially your own leadership, and you examine that quite closely. Um, so as we talk about that, how do you think about what you term the what you talk about as the inner game of leadership, how you lead through yourself and through the inside out? How do you think about that or define that?
So in my younger years of leadership, I recognized there was a lot of plates spinning and I needed some toolbox to make sure that I was taking care of myself when I was confronting all of the different challenges and needing to be able to show up for people. So I really started to research what is it even called? And there's been several times in my life where I didn't have the words for a concept that I was trying to understand. And then learning what the words are and then having that allow me to be able to research it was really helpful. And so sometimes people call what I'm talking about the inner game of leadership. Really, it's this whole consolidation of what is my own self talk? How am I caring for myself? How do I ready myself for the week? Am I gentle with myself and kind to myself? How do I think about my own failures so that I really can authentically show up? And so I've spent some time exploring that so that I can be more comfortable in the roles that I take on, and it's not as big of a self sacrifice,
Yeah.
giving up myself in order to do the roles that I'm in.
I like that a lot, and it's I think it's I'll say fortunate. I don't want to say lucky, but fortunate when we get some of those moments early on in our career because it sort of changes the trajectory. I know I had my own. Somebody taught me the premise that it's more important to be effective than right, and
Mm.
I just thought intellect was all I needed, and then I realized that how I show up really does matter. And it certainly set me on a different trajectory. I just was fortunate to get that lesson early on. Um, in your journey on the inner game of leadership and how you show up, what's been the hardest lesson, perhaps that you've had to learn through that journey?
I would say being gentle with myself for still not having things figured out that I think I should have figured out. Um, there's this Buddhist concept of the second arrow, and the idea is that something happens and we perceive it as negative, and then we're angry about the negative thing that happened. So we add the second arrow into it. And so I have spent a lot of time, and I've finally realized it in my own self talk, chastising myself for still trying to figure out whatever the thing is that I am dealing with. So the skill is in very intentionally paying attention to what I'm thinking about it, and recognizing when I am piling on in my own mind, picking out the different elements of the dialogue in my own mind, and then recognizing when I'm piling onto it and not making it better. Um, so a specific example is that in my organization, collaborative approaches to change is what the culture demands. And I tend to want to move out more quickly than the culture is comfortable with. And there's always this push and pull. Um, and so I'll make the same mistake over and over up to where I'll get out in front of the culture or I'll get out in front of what the collaboration demands and then chastise myself for it. And my learning is two things. Don't get out in front of what the culture will allow, and don't chastise myself for making the mistake. It's all right. I am learning also. Like, give myself the same grace that I would give the folks working for me.
Yeah. I think a lot of execs, depending on where they are on their own journey, struggle with that at some point. I know I certainly do. And for me, one of the tricks is realizing that, we think we're supposed to know stuff, right? Hey, that's what they pay me for. I'm in the big chair. I'm supposed to know all this stuff. And I think realizing or recognizing that knowledge and information in particular expires faster than milk. Um,
Mm.
so you can't know everything because it's changing, and then you kind of give yourself a pass. But having that, I'll say, compassion for yourself to say it's okay not to know anything, and not to know everything or to get it wrong is quite hard. Um, for you, in terms of managing that particular aspect, is it more about just getting to the, I'll say, forgiveness faster, or is it finding the triggers that put you off in the wrong direction, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, so I would say that it's certainly pattern recognition and learning what my own default approach is, recognizing that as early in the cycle of the approach as I possibly can to say, aha, I know I've done this before. How might I do it differently? But then also recognizing my own, I love that the nesting diagram of my area of control, my focus of control, my focus of influence, and then my focus of concern. And where am I within that diagram? Recognizing that is critical in whatever the situation is too. So I would say trying to catch it early and then watching my own reaction to it and asking for help.
Hmm. Awesome. So the journey of self improvement and self leadership improvement, it's all continuous improvement is a form of problem solving, which means we kind of have to know what gap we want to close next, or what improvement we want to make next. How do you go about deciding, where to go, what to go work on, what to go learn more about? Is it waiting for feedback from others that recognize gaps? Is it reflection? Is there a process? Is it just, driving in the morning, your head wanders and says, "This is interesting."
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I think that there's a baseline set of things that every organization needs. We need a healthy operating system that allows us to prioritize who we are, what are we doing, what are the services we provide, what needs to be broad scale, what needs to be improved within those. Are we assuring ourselves effectively that we're doing those things? Like, how are we doing and how do we know? Like, so the organization, we need that. We need to make sure that we know how we're caring for our people, um, understand what our communications are internally and externally, and have our own internal quality assurance. And so I'll first, in a new organization, kind of have this mental checklist of, in that broad set of attributes that an organization needs to be successful, like no matter what you're doing, do we have those things? And if we're missing one of those complete areas, then we need to get that piece of the system in place as soon as possible. Of course, there are always signals from the environment around the latest and the loudest and what's causing the most pain or the most risk that we might need to address concurrently with whatever it is and getting that baseline system in place. The other thing that I'll do is that I keep what's called a someday maybe list. It's from the technique Getting Things Done.
Mhm.
And anytime something comes up that, ooh, we need to work on that, we probably have some opportunities there, I will keep a backlog of opportunities should we have resources and time that we don't have at this point. So that when we go into an intentional planning session, it's not we're not just reacting to the latest and the loudest. We also have a healthy backlog of things that we might have noticed for whatever period of a time before
Mhm.
we when we weren't doing that planning session.
Yeah, so I know you've thought long and hard about your management operating system and how you utilize it, which you kind of went into there. Um, I'm kind of curious to kind of intersecting that with the personal leadership and how you're authentic. An operating system, management operating system is both content, meaning what are our priorities and metrics, and then also sort of method, meaning, when are we meeting and how do we prioritize and all of that. Probably more so on the method side. How much do you build your management operating system around the organization, the culture, the intersection with other groups? And how much do you insert yourself and how you best show up into that management operating system?
Mm. I love studying managing energy versus time
Mm.
and considering placement of engagements on a calendar when I can show up the way that I want to show up. So certainly I consider that to the extent that I feel like I'm able within the culture. I mean, I'm always trying to align on the practice and just the practicality of what is our cadence and when are we setting the meetings of what the ecosystem demands, because so many pieces of my organization system feed other pieces of the organizational system. So I would say at a baseline that helps me to keep stability is create predictability, recognize, even if I can't place everything in my operating system where I would ideally have it, if it's predictable, that makes it easier for me. Um, and I think also calms the water for my team if they can have something in their world that's stable and is not just always reactionary. Um, so I think it's a delicate balance between, kind of accommodating myself, but then also allowing the different pieces of our operating system to intersect with the other ones in the most elegant way possible, so that we're doing work one time, we're creating content one time and using it many times.
Yeah. Well, I think, really important thing you said is the importance and value of that stability, right? If we know we can rely on certain anchor points throughout our week that are going to be there, and I know what they're for, I can kind of relax. I don't have to send off a volley of emails if I know tomorrow we'll have a huddle and we can talk about it. Um, but if it's at the wrong time, to your point around energy, um, it's meetings are often measured in time, not how much we get out of them, not how much impact they have,
Yeah, that's
how
true.
much alignment are created. Um, so I think that energy versus time is an important thing. One of the reasons we choose time is it's very easy to measure. Energy is much harder. So how do you go about even just evaluating? You probably don't measure it, but how do you even go about evaluating the impact on energy both for yourself and your team? Is it just conversation, or are there other signals you start looking for about whether something's working or not from an energy perspective?
Well, I feel like I'm always assessing engagement in any kind of a gathering that we have. If we're problem solving, they'll if I am only getting blank stares, then clearly I need to pick up on a signal. And is it I have to figure out whether it's the topic, whether it's the type of facilitation that we have, whether it's everybody's energy level, whether it's change fatigue, whether it's really disagreement masquerading as
Yep.
silence. um, so when I am showing up as my best self, I do a lot of observation and interpreting. A mistake that I will make, though, is be over focused on the outcome that I need and plow through regardless of the signal in the room. Sometimes we have to do that because is time demands it, but the best outcomes never come from that approach. The other thing that I will work to do, so if I can anticipate that energy level will be low or that a topic will be challenging for a team, an example is that we recently had a trust meeting because I recognized that there was going to be a really big challenge between the dynamics of a team that my team needs to work with on a daily basis to be successful. And the leader of that team and and I put together what we called a zombie elephant meeting because we thought that it would be fun to have a provocative title just to get people's interest up.
Sure.
And we got stuffed elephants for everybody to hold like little woobies in the meeting. Knowing that we're going to need to talk about some hard things, talk about the elephant in the room. That was a symbolism of the elephant. But what we did to prepare people for that meeting was let them know why we were there, let them know the kinds of topics that we were going to be talking about. And it's a little bit of a stealing of people's mental bandwidth, honestly, beforehand. And so I try to plant little seeds to help them get mentally prepared to show up fully. Because my hope is that as they're just going through their life, they're starting to think about these things in their mind, and I'm getting to co-opt their space so that they can be ready to show up with the kind of energy that we're going to need to be able to solve whatever those problems in the room. Always make sure that there's food, and that the physical elements are covered too.
Yeah. Well, and I like the rationale behind giving them time to think about it when I wrote about in my book, Integrating Intuition. And when you kind of spring it on people and you have a meeting, then process is going to drive your problem solving, right? It's got to be process at that point, because you really had no space for people to tap into their intuition. But allowing that time frame allows them to tap into it in whatever way works best for them.
And you can imagine that at a national laboratory, I work with a lot of people who are deeply analytical.
Yes.
I tend to feel more comfortable making decisions with less data, less thought in advance. Probably serves me and doesn't serve me, but I learn that people need way more advanced notice for thinking about a topic than I can even sometimes imagine a human being needing, because it's so different than the way that I think sometimes. So when I am, again, showing up as my best self, I love your the way that you phrase it is tapping into that intuition. And it's just giving the brain time to allow the thing to soak.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about problem solving with different types of people. Because you kind of hinted at this, right? That you're as likely to have to ask somebody how many PhDs they have versus whether they just have one in your environment.
Yeah, it's kind of redundant to ask them if they do.
Right. It's a tremendous amount of intellectual horsepower inside the organization. And so, not just based on that, but based on all the different capabilities, personalities, and histories that you work with, how do you both evaluate and then adjust to the different thinking processes? And what you already gave was one example of that adjustment, but what are other ways you evaluate and adjust for the different capabilities, mindsets, or styles that you have to interact with?
Okay, so I try to think almost in a grid. I think in pictures. Sometimes I will roll my eyes up because I'm seeing the picture.
Yes.
That I kind of see it as a grid with at least 2 dimensions. It's probably 3-dimensional. I think about learning styles, whether people like to hear things, talk to learn, see things, read things. Whether people are more analytic by nature, more extroverted, kind of ways of being, styles.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's possible, design a problem solving ecosystem to be able to address those different things. If we can have, in addressing the different kinds of communication styles, if we can do a pre-read, if we can do the opportunity to listen to something ahead of time for the people that need it, and then have doodle sheets, something tactile that people can work with, then I think that allows for it. I also, when I'm showing up as my best self, can flex my style to the person that needs to have it, that has really, really different learning styles or different, almost strategic bents. That's another one. That's another dimension in the cube, is that there'll be people that are more naturally very, very tactical. Mm-hmm. And then people who are much more comfortable in that strategic realm and that wonder, big picture kind of thinking. And trying to understand all of those different things that are happening in the room. I can engage people with who I know are better at certain elements of it, or I can stretch people when I know that they're not as good in a certain area and ask a question that requires, say, tactically talented person to jump into wonder or to strategic thinking.
Yeah. So I want to ask a practical follow-up to that. And I think I know where you're headed, but I think it's an important question for those trying to mimic that. Do you try to evaluate where people are on your in your cube, or do you just assume you've got a little bit of all of it and design around that assumption?
You know, I'm lucky that I know my team pretty well. And usually when we're doing problem solving, it's with people that I'm used to working with. If we're doing something in a broader group, or if I'm preparing for an audience, 50 people or something like that, where we need to try to connect on all these different levels, then I will work to design for, hitting the middle somewhere in that.
Yeah, great. So one last question as we wrap up here. We kind of started with you had the opportunity to start a learning journey fairly early, and that journey's never stopped. You continue to explore and be curious about different things and add to your knowledge. For those that, especially those early in their career, that want to mimic that, they want to have a pathway where they are sort of in a perpetual learning mode. What's your recommendation for the best way for them to get started or to adopt that mindset?
Mm. Um, I think it's wonderful to start thinking about your own why. As leaders, we need to be able to talk about the why of a change, the why of a direction that we're moving in. I'm not sure if we spend as much time talking about our own why. Like, why are we doing this? Is it for as I move forward in my leadership journey and just age, um, what I believed was true about the spoils of accomplishment didn't turn out to be so true, and it really challenged my own why I do what I do. And I have essentially arrived on, because what I mean there in really plain language is that it's not as satisfying to achieve different levels, different outward signs of successes that I thought it would be when I was younger. And when I kind of arrived there, I've learned at least that there's always another mountain. There's always somebody more successful. I never actually feel like I've achieved enough to be satisfied, be proud, believe that I'm worthy enough. And that has taught me that I need to change my why,
Yeah.
and that I'm climbing the wrong mountain.
Yep.
And if I had realized that earlier, I think in my leadership journey, or if somebody had been able to articulate it to me in the way my ears could hear, I think that I would encourage my younger self to think more about the things that deeply matter in the moment. What are the things that you enjoy doing in the moment? Not that are just a means to the end, but that are purposeful just because you're doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and get more curious about those things and see how I could design my work to include more of those things, because then no matter the outcome, it's meaningful in and of itself.
I love that. Couldn't be a better way for us to end on that note. So, Krista, I thank you and for sharing your experience and perspective. And I wish you, your team, and all the wonderful people of Sandy all the best.
Thank you.